Hello, bonjour from Paris. I'm so excited to be here in Europe. You can see my backdrop is a little different because I'm in Paris. I am in the first week of my 3 month stay here in Europe, which was only literally possible by listening to this deeper voice inside me that my dreams are worth following, that things that I want, the things that I desire are actually worth pursuing in my life, and that it is so honoring of my desires to actually listen to them because it ends up building the life I truly want and giving the lifestyle inspiration to then other people. So super excited to see you. If you haven't met yet before, my name is Karolina Rzadkowska. I'm the author of the book Euphoric, Ditch Alcohol and Gain a Happier, More Confident You, and also an alcohol-free life coach and empowerment expert. And today I have some incredible questions that come from my clients, and they're actually really well matched and paired together. So I can't wait to dive in. So my first question is basically, I know I want more freedom. I know what kind of lifestyle I want. I know I want to spend more time with my family, have more travel, have more just freedom in my life, but I don't know what kind of job or business to actually start to get there. And my second question is really similar to that in that, well, let's say I do want to get started, but how would I even start out financially? How does it, they say a lot of times that business is in the red for a really long time before it gets into the black. How do you get started financially if you do have some kind of hunch or some kind of idea to get going? So I'm super excited to answer those questions in the live today. And, if you ever have a question, if you ever want to work with me intimately, I answer questions here in this live for the community to all hear, but all of the questions always come from my clients. So if you're ever interested in, working with me and joining in any of the groups, we just launched Become Emboldened this past week. It was such an incredible, showing of people, such incredible women in the program. I would obviously love to work with you one day. So when it comes to these questions of knowing that you want more freedom, I think that's really key to know sometimes what we don't want and what we do want. Because the more that we know what we don't want, we can know what we want to move away from. And towards what we do want, we can more move towards it, right? So for example, what did I know I didn't want in my life? I knew I didn't like commuting. I actually hate commuting so much. I love working from home so much. I can't even fathom the idea right now of getting into a car and spending, 30 minutes to an hour in traffic to get somewhere to sit in front of a computer. Like, right now, that makes absolutely no sense to me. But back in the day, I just could figure that out. Okay, I don't like commuting. I never really liked working for a boss. I always felt like I really honored my own autonomy. I didn't really like not only being told what to do, but just feeling like someone's kind of watching over my back. I never really liked that. And I never really liked the lack of not being able to have direction over what projects I worked on or anything like that. I was passionate about what I was passionate about. And, being able to have some freedom within your employer to be able to work on that was cool, and which I got sometimes, but not always. And so those were the things I knew I didn't want. What are the things I knew I wanted? I knew I wanted more freedom. I mean, I am obsessed with traveling. I love traveling so much. And, 2 weeks a year, oftentimes just 10 days off, you take one vacation and then a few weekends here and there, and that's it, right? I knew I always didn't like that. I knew I wanted freedom. I knew I wanted to spend the short period of time that I had on this planet Earth actually going and seeing it. You know what I mean? And not just spent in a cubicle for years on years on years just to pay the mortgage and the bills and all these kinds of things. So I knew I wanted more freedom. I knew I also wanted to make an impact. Social impact has always been really important to me. And especially as I learn more about, companies that do corporate social responsibility and social innovation and really just make their purpose to help other people in some format, that really always appealed to me. But, back even when I was getting my MBA, I had no idea what that would look like. I remember we all had to come up with a project of actually forming some kind of company. And, it was so hard to figure stuff like that out. And even when I did projects like that with my teammates, it was always something so random. Like, okay, let's do a t-shirt company that gives back proceeds to, this community in this area. Like, I'm not saying that's lame or anything, but it just wasn't something I actually cared about. I didn't care about the t-shirts. I didn't care about the art. It just wasn't something I really cared about. And so sometimes when we think that we have to have some kind of business idea that's really unique, We think that we have to have some kind of idea that's never been done before, right? And that's kind of this traditional startup method of really thinking that, okay, this business, this service, this thing doesn't exist, so let's go out and create it. But we never even stop to ask ourselves, wait a minute, am I interested in this thing? Do I really care about selling this widget or this thing? Like, that's one of the most important things. And so now that we know what we don't want and we're moving towards what we do want, let's start asking ourselves some guiding questions to figure out what it is that we should actually do if we want to start a business or have um, a unique kind of job that really gives us the kind of freedom that we're looking for in our lives and the ability to live a really rich, vibrant life without being tied to a certain place and boss and all those kinds of things. So good to see you, Karen. Good morning to you as well. It's 5 p.m. for me here in Paris. I'm super excited to be here. But when you are looking for a new opportunity, when you are looking for, the old way doesn't work for me anymore, maybe corporate is something you don't want to do anymore, maybe you don't want to work certain hours, you don't want to work maybe 5 days or 6 days a week, whatever it is, and you're really starting to ask yourself, like, what would give me more freedom? What am I care about? I want to try to guide you into questions that actually help you understand what you would like to do. And so, sometimes like when I'm working with people, we have these blinders on. We have these blinders on, and we think that whatever's in front of us with these blinders is what's realistic. And so we put the blinders on, and then we don't really see what we think is not realistic, if that makes sense, right? We just think of like, well, that could make sense. That would work. That would be feasible. That might pay me my bills, right? And that we don't really like look outside the box, right? And so I like to start with the desire first. I don't like to start with what's realistic. Technically, anything is possible. Technically, anything what you want to do has probably been done on this planet before. Someone's done it. And if someone's done it, that's just proof that you could do it too, right? Like that is actually proof that you could do it too. So let's start with desire. So there's so many different questions that you could ask yourself about what you would want to do to figure out how to actually create a job or business out of this. But I personally think that if you are passionate about freedom, if you're passionate about making an impact, if you're passionate about really owning your own life, that starting a business can often be the vehicle to get there. And starting a business obviously doesn't have to mean you start like a factory and you sell widgets and you have some kind of really big corporate structure down the line. It literally, you could just be a solopreneur. A solopreneur is someone who works for themselves. They make their own hours, they like make their own income. They can expand obviously with a small team if they want to, but it doesn't have to be this big thing, especially if you really value freedom and you really want just that more than anything. And what would you do, right? What you're like, I have no idea what I would do. So there's really two ways to look at it. Is one, what you're most passionate about, and two, also what you're an expert at. So what do I mean by most passionate? So, for example, making an impact is really important to me. That's my husband going for a run. But making an impact is really important to me. So when it came down to deciding what I wanted to do, I really looked at the past version of me, and the past version of me needed help. The past version of me needed someone to talk her through all the situations she was going through. The past version of me was so lost and confused and really, really could have used my mentorship today, right? And so now it is my goal, really, of everything I've done, my book, my coaching business, the programs I run, they're all technically created for the past version of me who needed them so much. And obviously, I work in the space of helping women ditch alcohol, but the past version of you could have come against any sort of challenge, any sort of thing that you needed help with that you, the present version of you, could help with today. Look at just like a silly example. Like, let's say that you went to college, and by going through to college, you maybe had to take the SAT test in the United States. And maybe you also, had to take AP classes, and then you had to write, essays, and you had to apply to these schools. The version of you that was first going through that in high school probably had no idea what you were doing. But after you've done it one time, or you really like honed in on it and got good at what you were doing and figured it all out, like now you could go back to that past version of you and help yourself through that, right? And help yourself through that and know what's really important, what really matters, what they're really looking for, all that kind of stuff. Now it's just like a small, silly example, but how many things, like let's say you are a mom and you have a baby, and then you have another baby, and you really struggle as a first-time mom to, get your little infant to sleep at night and to really form a sleep schedule, and you start learning a lot about sleep schedules, and then you have a second baby and then you learn even more because they're a little different. The version of you who really understands how to help a newborn sleep didn't exist back in the past. Like, you needed to learn all that. But how valuable is that information for someone else? How valuable is that information for someone who has no idea what they're freaking doing? You know what I mean? And that's where this idea of mentorship, I think, is really incredible and really cool, because mentorship is this idea that you go through challenges, you go through experiences, you go through different situations in life, and you really do gain knowledge and wisdom from that situation or from that experience or from that skill that you develop or from that challenge that you overcome, and that you can actually then go back and help the past version of you through it. Now, yes, this can be something you went through, like helping someone maybe lose weight. If you've lost weight before, maybe you had a baby and then you had to lose a lot of weight and you lost the weight, and now it's something that you are really passionate about, and you're really passionate about helping. Like, if only someone was there to talk to me about, the postpartum stage and how to really care for myself at the same time and make good nutrition choices and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's something you really dived into and got really interested in after that. And there's just such a need for the past version of you to have that information today. Maybe, obviously it's something you overcame, like I said, like even changing your relationship with alcohol. I work with so many women who have a desire to help women with that very thing. And it's like, I really fundamentally believe it wouldn't have even happened in your life. It wouldn't have become relevant for you if maybe you weren't meant to eventually help people with it, in some respect. Like, you don't have to necessarily become an alcohol-free life coach. But I know a ton of my clients who are either health coaches or nutritionists or mindset coaches, and it's so uncanny how alcohol still comes to play in so many of their clients' challenges, right? Like, alcohol is ubiquitous as a self-sabotage stopper, as a playing small stopper in our lives, and really having that in-depth knowledge around how we use alcohol, but also how to overcome it, can be so key for so many different people that you're helping, even if it's nothing to do with actually alcohol coaching, right? And so there's so many ways to figure out what you're passionate about, and I'm going to leave you with some guiding questions. But another area that's often overlooked is not just necessarily what you're passionate about, but also what you've developed skills and talent in. We live in such a different world in 2022 than we did even just 10 or 20 years ago. Like, there's so many ways that we can use our skills and our talents in ways that don't go through the traditional, I have a 9 to 5 with my health benefits and all this, and this. Like, sometimes we develop expertise in, let's say, incorporating diversity and inclusion in organizations, or how to be an entrepreneur in an organization, or how small businesses should do accounting or something like that. Like, you have knowledge, you have skills that you've cultivated. And you can often find that if you prefer the freedom, if you prefer the flexibility, if you prefer being on your own instead of working for a big boss, you can often go on your own in any of those fields and act as a consultant for that very thing. You know what I mean? Instead of working in a big law firm, you could come in and be like a consulting lawyer for businesses that you actually care about, small businesses or something like that, and really build a name for yourself in this different respect, in this different world, instead of like the big honcho kind of big firms. Like, there's so much possibility if we just get really curious. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, I launched and held the Ditch Alcohol and Discover Your Purpose workshop. And in that workshop, I guided us through many different questions about how to actually determine what it is that you're passionate about. But I would ask first yourself, what am I interested in? Like, seriously, it's the first question. What am I interested in? Like, what are the things that I like to read about? What are the things I like to learn about? What are the things that I just are very interesting to me? Maybe it's health, maybe it's running, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's alcohol-free living, maybe it's personal development, maybe it's finding something that you're super excited about for your own career. There's so many things to just ask first as what you're interested in. And now another question is not just what you're interested in, but what do you actually want to share back with other people? So for example, maybe you're really interested in yoga, but it's just your own practice. You just love to practice it on your own. You have no interest in actually talking to people about yoga. You have no interest in, like, sharing any messages about yoga. You just like to practice yoga in your life. And there's a lot of interests I have like that I don't share with other people. Like I don't make it part of my company or my brand, but that doesn't mean I'm not interested in them, right? Like I'm super interested in foodie culture. I don't really talk about that like in my brand though, right? Because I don't need to share it. It's not something that I care about in that sense. So not only are what you interested in, but what you're interested in and want to share, right? So information or a topic area that you really care about. And then how do you start a business around it? Obviously, yes, there are other businesses outside of just services, but services I think is one of the easiest thing to do because a service just means that, like I said earlier, you have some kind of information, some kind of wisdom, some kind of skill or talent that you've cultivated over time, or even a challenge you've overcome. And there's a person out there on this planet that doesn't have that and that needs your help. And you could help them by either coaching them, right? Coaching them through it so that they can overcome it themselves, or you could do it like do it for you services, right? Like graphic designers often work in that kind of way where you don't teach someone graphic design necessarily, but you do it for them. Someone hires you and then you create the beautiful art or the beautiful graphics that will go for their company. So it's not just this coaching mentoring thing that I'm talking about. Any kind of service can be done for you, done with you, teach someone how to do it, right? I have a friend, for example, she's an artist and she does sell her prints online. So she makes a living by obviously selling prints online, but that's not the only way she makes a living. She also teaches people how to draw and how to paint. So not only is she producing the thing that she's selling, she's also teaching people how to do that thing. So there's so many different vehicles and ways to go about this. So first of all, like I said, if you have no idea, start with what you're interested in and what you want to share back. Just hone in on that. And this can take a while. This can take a few weeks or even months of just really good introspection. Another really good question to ask yourself is what you're jealous of. So what you're jealous of will often point what you really wish you had in your life, right? Like jealousy is really envy. Envy is something you wish you had but you don't have or you believe is not possible for you. Are you jealous of other writers? Are you jealous of other business owners? Are you jealous of coaches? Are you jealous of politicians? I don't know. Are you jealous of actors? Like whose life do you really wish you had? And when you decide who it is, that's actually a really good clue about why you're jealous about them, right? That's a really good clue that even Gretchen Rubin, she's a 4 times best-selling author, maybe even 5 now. She used to be a lawyer. She used to be a really up-and-coming lawyer for Sandra Day O'Connor that she clerked for her. But she asked herself who she was really jealous about in her life, and she discovered that it was actually her friends that went into writing careers. And that was the big pivot for her, that she was like, that's what I really want. That's my desire. So she pivoted and then really decided to go into the writing career and made an incredible living out of that. We often get stuck and say, what I really am passionate about or what I care about won't make me money. And the thing is that we often say that before we even start our journey. We just say it and cut ourselves off right at the beginning. I used to say that about writing. There's no money in writing. I'd never make money in writing. Even if I wrote, for example, travel articles, I'd make like $50 for one article. Like that's not a living. And so before I even tried, before I even like actually got into it, I just cut myself off from the possibility. And I really want to guard you against that because the only way you're ever going to really make mountains move here and really build the solid thing that you want to build is to actually go for it. And I really do believe that when we're working on something we're really passionate about, the abundance will come. The abundance will come, especially if it has a lot of value for other people and that you're helping other people. The value will come. I'm not saying it's going to come on the first day. I'm not saying that all of a sudden you put your foot in and you're like, I'm going to be a writer and you get paid your first day this ginormous salary or something. But I think we need to stop ourselves from saying this won't pay or this won't ever be able to, make a living before we even start. Because guess what? That's just an excuse. It's an excuse for fear. It's an excuse for actually trying the thing you really want to try and potentially failing. You're scared of that outcome, so you put this excuse up that there's no money in this or that will never pay or whatever it is, and you don't even get started in the thing. There's so many examples of people who went to go follow their dreams. For example, I know this woman who, like when she was 25 or 26 or 27, whatever it was, she left behind a corporate career. She decided to go backpack the world. And her first few years backpacking, she was really broke. She used her savings. She, stayed in hostels. She ate street food, all this stuff. But she continued following her desires and her desires and her desires. And, eventually, not that long into this journey, she started to get paid by different travel agencies, hotels, restaurants, you name it, to actually create content for them. And now makes like a very healthy salary and is very well known in her field and in her niche in doing that, right? And I really believe that had she cut herself off at the very beginning and said, I don't have the money to travel, there's never going to be any kind of money in this, she would have never gotten the opportunity that came down the line. I think we stop ourselves from this all the time. So, like I said, what you're interested in, what you actually want to share back, who are you jealous of, right? And sometimes looking at what social causes pull at our heartstrings can be a really good indicator of what we really want to do. Because I really believe that one of our deepest human needs is to make a contribution and to make a difference in this world. And that's when we really feel like not only that we're fulfilled, but also that we matter. Like my life matters because I make a difference to other people. And until we feel like that, sometimes we can feel like we don't really are attached to this deeper meaning. And so really looking at the things you care about, whether it's women's equality or empowerment or environmentalism or, eradicating poverty, whatever it is, there's a clue in there for you too. And no, I'm not talking about like going to volunteer in a few extra hours to go serve dinner at like a homeless shelter. I'm not talking about that. Volunteering is great and everything, but I'm not talking about something where you just do manual labor or, just a little bit here to, alleviate a situation for just one night or so. I'm talking about actually being part of a bigger solution where we actually form, if we really think about it, forming a business is one of the most powerful things you could do because there's a certain economy and there's a certain power balance and there's a certain balance of money in people's hands right now, right? And imagine if more good-hearted, well-intentioned women who want to make a difference in the world, imagine if those were the people that held more of that money and that power. Imagine how different our world would be. So even you striving to actually take space up in our economy by forming a business and by going after, the dream on your heart, I really do think that that even is shifting our world and making a huge difference. Right? Like we talk about sometimes like greed and how people are so money hungry, but can you imagine how different our world would be if money actually went into the hands of like beautifully hearted women who want to make a difference and contribute back to the world? They say that women actually contribute almost like 30 to 40% of their income back to the community, where men it's like only like 10% or something. I'm not saying that obviously as a stereotype, it's just intriguing, like how different would the world look if that was something that we valued more and that, women took up more power and more economic value in the world. I think it would be a different world. And that's why there's so many different initiatives and microfinance and microloaning around the world to help women do so. So those are all really good guiding questions. Honestly, at this point too, if you're stuck, it's an introspective game about really listening to your desires. But it's also at one point you just have to do something. You just have to take action. You just have to start moving forward. I knew I wanted to write a book, but I wasn't sure about a business, right? But I started researching it and I learned that if I want to write a book, I have to have a business. Like that's basically how the publishing world worked. So I took a step and I registered a business and I bought a domain, right? Like I had no idea what I was doing, but I just took inspired action. And so sometimes if you're confused, if you have no idea what would inspired action even look like for you, buy a website domain. Seriously, get your own name as a website domain. So if your name is like Marianne Smith, go get mariannesmith.com, buy it, and have your domain as your website. And that's a huge inspired action. Even if you have no idea what the actual website will be, your name is your brand. Like your name is often like the thing that most businesses go by anyway. I don't go by my name. My business is called Euphoric because my last name is crazy. But if it wasn't as crazy, maybe I would have done it just my name. Like there's nothing wrong with starting there. And start playing around. If you have advice to share, start putting it up on your website. Everything can be changed. Everything can be iterated. Don't be scared to just put something out there. Don't be scared to just be creative. Once you step into that creative role, new ideas will start coming to you. And the thing that you can't figure out right now, you're like, what am I supposed to do? I'm not sure. The clouds will part and you'll start to learn what it truly is. Now, I got another question that was really insightful too, which was basically like when you want to start, how do you get started financially? Like a lot of us obviously have our jobs, our corporate jobs or our, institutional jobs to pay the bills and to, take care of ourselves. How do you start financially if you want to go off on your own? That can be a really scary thing. So I'm going to just be as transparent as possible and share what I did. And obviously, you can find any path to success, and there's all these different roads that people take. But this is what I did, and it felt very much like I was honoring both my desires and taking inspired action and moving forward with my business, but I was also keeping a safety net for a while before I just took this huge leap of faith. So I started my business. For the first 6 months, I did nothing but plan my business. I didn't sell anything. I didn't have anything anyone could buy. I did not participate in any kind of commerce. But for 6 months, I just worked on preparing my business to get to a point where I could sell something, right? So I started with my website. I bought a website. I got a, domain. I started putting blogs up about sharing about advice about how to ditch alcohol. I got a social media, right? I started putting stuff up on Instagram and on Facebook. I started building a community slowly by slowly. I started getting people on my email list, right? I started sharing like tips, like 10 ways to have the best Thanksgiving alcohol free. And then people would sign up on my email list to get the 10 tips. So for the first 6 months, I really didn't even launch anything or sell anything, which in hindsight, I could have probably gotten started earlier, but I just wanted to have everything prepared. I wanted to figure out all the like LLC and the taxes and all that. Then I started actually selling something. And so I started selling a course first. And I also obviously worked on that course while I was also still preparing my business. And the course was my standard framework about how to ditch alcohol, which eventually became the like meat of my book, right? It's like what I got a book deal out of. And so I started selling that online. And as I started getting certified with different coaching certifications, I started also offering one-to-one services, right? Where I would coach people one-to-one as well. And so while I was doing a lot of this, I had a full-time job. I used to work in higher ed. I worked at a university. And so I had a 40-hour work week, right? I had a full-time job. I had to commute. This was before the pandemic. I had to leave my house every day at like 7:30 and I wouldn't get back till like 5:30 or whatever it was. And that was my life. And so oftentimes we think like, how could I possibly do something else when I have this job that's just draining me and it takes up so much energy and then I have to cook dinner and I have to work out and it can feel really overwhelming. I know that, right? But there's something really magical I think that also happens when we work on our passions. There's this phenomenon when we ditch alcohol called the pink cloud. And the pink cloud is really this idea that your neurotransmitters are rebalancing. You're finally seeing the world for what it really is. The mess of alcohol is going away in your life. And it's like you're awakened to this possibility. You're like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I don't have to drink anymore, right? I feel so good. I also think that there's a pink cloud when it comes to launching a business or a movement or a passion. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business, but let's just say a movement or a passion. I think there's a pink cloud phenomenon that happens there too. You get so freaking excited to actually start sharing the thing you're sharing. The very first time you buy your domain name, you're gonna have so many butterflies in your stomach. You're just gonna be like, oh my God, what did I do? I can't believe it. The very first time you post something online, the very first time you get a customer, the very first time you make any little baby progress within your business, it's gonna feel amazing. And it is like that pink cloud phenomenon where you're just so excited. The world is all of just this opportunity and you feel amazing. So imagine that you have that kind of energy. That's the energy you have. And you also have a full-time job. So what ends up happening is that your energy that you're like really creating within your business starts spilling over into the other areas of your life, right? And all of a sudden, instead of feeling like you're adding more to your plate, like, oh, I got this job and then I'm trying to launch a business and I gotta feed the kids and I gotta, it starts to feel like you actually have energy for everything else because working on your passion gives you that energy. It literally feels amazing and you can't wait to get back to it. Like it's something that's so riveting to you. And even if it's not the actual thing that's riveting to you, just going and figuring something out is riveting. Like you're like, I have no idea how to put a calendar up on my website. And you figure it out and then you're like, yes, I'm Superwoman. I figured it out, right? Like little things like that start stacking and stacking to literally give you wins every single day. Yes, there's challenges. Yes, there's frustrations. Yes, the tech sucks sometimes. But every single time you surpass it and you figure it out, it feels like $1,000,000. It feels amazing. So you might not have as much time in a logistical normal calendar or, 24 hours, but you're actually feeding yourself way more energy because you're really working on something outside your comfort zone that you care about. And the thing is too is like I know a lot of people who do have 9 to 5 jobs who can find a little bit of freedom in their day. Maybe on their lunch break they can work on their business, maybe a little bit, after a meeting or something. Obviously, not everyone, but there's sometimes a lot of time pockets that we have in our day that we don't even notice how much extra time we have if we were to just utilize it differently. Like everybody's on social media. Everybody has a Netflix account. Everybody's on Facebook. We all spend time doing things that might not always be serving our best interests. Obviously, any personal development you're doing like this today is amazing, but when we're just swiping, when we're just watching another rerun, all that stuff is just empty time. And I'm not saying take away your rest time, but sometimes we can really find pockets of time in more places than we think we have. And so I don't want anyone to think that a business actually is this huge thing that will take away all your time. You start with baby steps. The first week you just figure out how to put a website up, and then you work on that for a month. And then the next month you work on how to do this next thing. And then the next month you work on that. Like you're always just doing one little baby step. It's like you're putting down one little brick after brick after brick, and eventually you will build a house. Now, financially, what did I actually do? So, like I said, I had a day job. I worked on my business. Actually, that was when I was waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning. I would wake up at 5 a.m. and start working on my business then. I would also work on it after work sometimes and during work if I could, right? Not obviously always, but sometimes when I could. Sorry, there was like a mosquito flying around. And so that's obviously how I did it with the time. But with the money, this is also what I did. So I had this full-time job. The full-time job was paying the bills. It was also paying, a little extra into savings every month. And so instead of having all of my paycheck go to my normal household fund and, pay the bills, pay the mortgage, pay all the stuff and a little bit of savings, I decided my business is important. It's worth investing in. And so for every month, I think for maybe not the first few months, but like once I was already kind of a few months into it, I would take $800 out of my paycheck and put it towards my business. So that helped me get set up with some of the softwares I wanted to get for myself. That helped me, I think even hire like get my first course that really helped me build a business. It helped me, like talk to a lawyer one time. It's just these things that I needed to pay for before I had really that much income coming in from the business. So financially, that's what I did. I got super energized by working on my business, and that's how I was able to fit it in with the timing of my job. And then I would also take $800 from every paycheck and use it towards my business. So then, I'm doing them in tandem. I'm building these courses. I'm starting to get one-on-one clients. It comes to the point where the time that I've spent working on my business and having a full-time job is between like 1.5 to 2 years, right? 1.5 of me like actually selling stuff, 2 years of me just in total working on it. And I'm getting all these signs that it's time to quit my job. I actually start getting signs that it's time to quit my job like a year before, but I wasn't listening to those signs. I was just like, no, my business isn't ready yet. It's not making enough money yet. And there was like a threshold that my business would make. Like I never surpassed this certain threshold. Like I never surpassed 5K for a long time, right? And I was like, no, my business is not ready yet. Like this cannot like, sustain me. It's not going to do it. But then I started getting really these signs from the universe that it was time and that to trust. And that, if you really want to move forward with your book and your book deal and your coaching, you need to quit your job. So I decided one summer in 2020 to quit my job. And literally the next month, I doubled my income and then tripled it. And literally have had like months that have been incredible since then. It was as if the universe wasn't going to give me the proof first. I had to take the leap of faith first, and then the proof came. And that was an incredible lesson that oftentimes we wait for the proof before we actually take the leap of faith. So once I quit my job, I obviously didn't have the income to continue like supplementing my business. So my business was really standing on its own and had to make enough to, obviously pay the business bills, have some savings in the business, and pay obviously part of my household bills. I am married, so I do have my husband who had a full-time job up until this week. So that's how we managed it. And my business continued to grow. I continued to take baby step after baby step after baby step. I never took out any loans. I think I got, when the COVID first hit, I got like $1,600 from the government. And then I had to pay it back right away because it was just bearing interest. I was like, this was dumb. I'm not going to use it. So I just paid it back right away. So I didn't really go with loans. Obviously, if something needs a really big upfront investment, that's where, loans from friends, family, the bank, or even obviously one day down the line, capital venture or venture capitalism or angel investing comes in. But the thing is that I really believe in like creating something that works first before investing all of this money into it, and then, having a company that may or may not like sink or swim, and that's kind of how traditional startups work, is that they just get so much investments and they're in the red for so long before they finally figure out how to be profitable. I like the idea of making money right away. I like the idea of getting to be profitable right away. And so there's something that's really, I think, admirable, finding a company or a business that you can launch that literally isn't take all this upfront investment. Like you don't have to go get a factory or all this land or all this lease. Now in 2022, we don't even have to work in the same building. Like I have my team spread out all over the world. Like things have changed just so much. And I think a lot of businesses are heading that way, even the more traditional ones. So sometimes this idea of overhead isn't as much as you think. And I will tell you honestly, the biggest expense in my business is personal development. I hire coaches, I hire mentors, I work in masterminds, I buy courses. That's always been the biggest expense of my business. All of the other stuff, like the software, is minimal, right? Like $15 a month here, maybe $100 a month there. Like it's minimal, the software stuff. I also spend quite a bit of money on my team, but that's also something that I didn't do until, the last few years, not at the very beginning. I didn't have a team at the very beginning. I worked by myself, right? So I would say my biggest expenses are my team and also into learning, literally learning more and more and more. Not only into business, like actual strategy, but also into personal development, because they say that a business can never grow further than the personal development of the owner. If you think that you're, not deserving of so much abundance, then your business won't make that much, right? You need to always be growing for your business to grow. So those are my two biggest expenses with my business. But like I said, when I first started, I didn't have a team, so there was no team expense. And that's kind of how I've made it work. And now, like, my husband quit his job. We're in Europe, like, we're going to be traveling. It's all just reliant on my business. And my business does really well after all these years of like working on it and just being so passionate about it to make the finances really work out. I think I really believe that when we're working on something we're passionate on, when we're giving value to other people, when we're contributing to society and literally helping someone who is in a position that we were stuck in before, it's going to work out for you. It's going to really manifest the life that you want. And I know this live today has two different questions I got to really kind of go over them about, well, what if I don't know what I want? Plus also, how would I even start financially? I hope I was able to kind of peel back the onion. And I've had clients that have literally worked so much faster than me. I have business clients that I work with, and they are so much quicker than the things that how long it took me to get started and up and running. I have a client who literally like quit her job within just 2 months of coaching. She quit her job and has like all these client rosters now. She has a full-time client roster. It's incredible. I have another client who literally just got started and already has clients. Like I was way slower when it comes to this. And now when I do business coaching, I don't share, here, this is what I did and you should do that. I also look back and say, these are the mistakes I made. Don't make those mistakes. This is what you should really do now. Like we learn so much more in hindsight. That's why I love doing business coaching now, because I'm like, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Just focus on this. And that's why my clients are so successful and so much quicker than I was, right? And I love it. I love to hear their wins. I love to see them succeeding in that way. So I know that this had a lot of different parts to it and a lot of different ways of looking at it, but the finances can work out. I think we get stuck in such a limiting belief to just say, like, it's not going to work, so I therefore have to just stay stuck in the job that I hate. That is literally an excuse, and it's an excuse grounded in fear. And you're telling yourself that because it feels safer in the moment. What's safer in the moment is not necessarily what's going to give you the fulfillment you're really looking for in your life and the lifestyle that you really want. And when it comes to finding your passion, and finding what you really want to do for a job or a career, I just listed having all these different businesses that, really help someone with either mentorship or some kind of expertise that you give back. But there's also ways that you can take a corporate job and really just translate it into a more consultant or even a freelance position. And sometimes that's where you get the freedom and the flexibility you really want. And I think when we just move forward, the universe continues to give opportunities. So I have a friend, for example, who does career coaching, and she helps people even find like not the dream job, but the side job that's going to give them the dream job eventually, that will give them the freedom and flexibility today. And so that literally just means getting started. You don't have to have the perfect answer or the perfect business to get started. Buy your domain name, like I said, of like your first and your last name, throw in your middle if it's really common, you know, just start with anything. If you're a lawyer, if you're an accountant, if you're any one of these kind of professions, like you could literally just ask your family and friends if they could use your services. And I'm sure there's one person out of 30 people who would love you for that. And you can get paid on the side for that. You know, like I know that might not be your dream job. It might be, but we don't have to go find the big pinnacle of the dream yet. We just have to take inspired action and believe that the universe is always guiding us towards the direction we need to go. And so honestly, that's where I would start, you know, if especially if a client has no idea where they want to go and what they want to do, like how can you take whatever you do in your current profession and actually offer it on your own autonomy with your own, you know, company, technically you as a sole proprietor, and go offer that to someone else, you know, like hands down, people need that kind of expertise or service that you offer. So get started with just anything, take inspired action, get your domain name, and really take the time to do these inquisitive questions and work through the program when you're in Become Emboldened. You're going to be working through what this deeper purpose and what this interest and how to form goals around it is going to be. It doesn't just necessarily like, it will just hit you one day. I don't know how to explain it, but it will just hit you one day. And just having faith that you're moving in the right direction by continuing to get to know yourself and your desires will be key. Oh my gosh, I've been talking for 43 minutes straight. It's time to end this live. Thank you so much for joining me. You know, au revoir from Paris. I'm super excited to be here and I can't wait to be on the next live next Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Euro. Till next time.